You see what you get when it comes to Spyro 1. It's a very gamey game that's unapologetically simple. It's not trying to be anything more than what it is. You're getting exactly what's on the menu, which is collecting, platforming, and this purple dragon voiced by the Taco Bell dog.
How about charge them and flame them? We are dragons after all.
Afraid? Of what?
Or SpongeBob if you're playing Reignited.
What about Nasty Gnorc? I'm going after him.
There's very rarely ever a sense of urgency, the soundtrack is masterful, and the visuals just have that perfect PS1 dreamlike quality about them. It all combines to create what is a very cozy experience. An experience perhaps even more snugly than the games that would precede it. Speaking of, I've already covered the other PS1 Spyro games. I know it's stupid and unintuitive and my fault, but I suggest going 2, 3, 1 if you want this to be a little bit more digestible. But, you know, do what you want. I'm not your dad. This order was kind of retroactively decided upon anyway, but I am gonna spin it in such a way to where it lines up here because this is actually the order that I experienced these games. Spyro 2 was the first game I ever placed in a PlayStation, and I wouldn't get to play Spyro 1 proper until about 2012 on a PSP with a Pandora battery. Does anybody remember when people would do that? Technically, I did play that Spyro 1 demo on the Crash Bandicoot Warp disc, but I digress. Spyro 1 has just always felt really elusive to me. I feel like I've never really experienced it fully, nor do I have a good handle on my opinion about it. That is until now. I finally did my due diligence as a Spyro fan. I purchased a copy off of eBay, played it all the way through 120%, so I could fulfill my 20-year pursuit of being inducted into the Spyro PS1 Trilogy Completionist Hall of Fame. So please join me for one more level-by-level Spyro analysis, because I'm sure as hell not doing those PS2 Spyro games.
Good work, Spyro-san.
Like the Spyro 2 and 3 videos, this is going to be extremely subjective. I'll probably be bringing those two games up a lot, as they are my baseline when it comes to Spyro. We will be at the very least touching on every single level in the game, whilst intertwining some narrative and gameplay mechanic talk. While the video is going to primarily focus on the PS1 version of Spyro, we might take a peek at the Reignited version here and there, so just something to keep in mind. Right after putting in the disc, the Spyro 1 title screen begins the tradition of Spyro murdering a poor innocent creature before the player has any direct control over his actions. Although you may not even notice because your speakers are going to be pumping the Spyro 1 theme, composed by the great Stuart Copeland. And I hope you like this song because it contains a musical motif that's going to appear in numerous other tracks. Personally, I love it. I think it's fun, it's catchy. I get why they didn't put it in future games, as they almost overuse it here. It really does represent this game as an experience more than Spyro as a character. It makes this game stand out musically from 2 and 3. While those games do have theme songs that are synonymous with them, they don't have this special musical calling card that can just be sprinkled in any song.
Okay, rolling.
Oh, it's been peaceful here in the 5 worlds, or is it 6? For a dragon's age. We now have 12,000 treasure, or is it 14,000? What about this Gnasty Gnorc character? Now I understand he's found a magic spell to turn gems into warriors for his cause.
I'll take that question. Nasty Gnorc is a simple creature. Simple! He has been contained in a remote world and is no threat to the Dragon Kingdom. No threat! Besides, he is ugly. Ugly? That does it!
Looks like I've got some things to do.
Coming from 2 and 3, this cutscene, the first time I watched it, gave me tonal whiplash. And by no means am I saying 2 or 3 had super deep intros, but I mean, this is literally framed as a satirical talk show. I mean, you got this boom mic in the frame. And the best part is, it establishes almost everything we need to know in about a minute. Now compare that to the sequels, which have intros of about 3 minutes, title screen to gameplay. And if you want more, Insomniac did you right. They put a little plot synopsis inside the Spyro 1 PS1 booklet. You know, remember when games used to come with these? This was prime bathroom reading material before smartphones. They really got Alora and Hunter in the Uncanny Valley here. Ugh. The Spyro 1 manual sprinkles in a few more details into the story, some of which might differ depending on your region. Our game's big bad, Nasty Gnorc, or as intellectuals say, Gnasty Gnorc. The manual states that the dragon families banished Nasty to their junkyard for being resentful of them and their jewels. As payback, Nasty casts a spell to turn all the dragons into crystal and creates a potion that animates the gems into Gnorc's soldiers. Even though in the intro cutscene, the interviewer mentions this being a spell and not a potion.
He's found a magic spell to turn gems into warriors.
And I'm making the assumption that the ugly comment that the Clancy Brown dragon made was the straw that broke the camel's back here. It also leads into why I prefer the reignited intro cutscene. He's actually watching a television, whereas in the original, he's just standing in his living room.
Besides, he is ugly. Ugly? That does it!
The manual provides a reason why Spyro wasn't affected by the spell. Now, this is something that differs per region. The North American version says that Spyro was playing hooky, we can assume from Dragon School, while the PAL version says that Spyro was so short that the spell shot over his head. This is kind of a Ripto's Rage, Gateway to Glimmer situation, and while I do like the North American explanation, it gives kind of a 90s edge to Spyro. It makes no sense because he's right there. It's almost like somebody wrote this before the game was made. Also, thanks to this manual, I just learned that Gnorc is a combination of gnome and orc. Huh. Welcome to the first hub world, Artisans. You're given the freedom to move around, and instinctively you're probably gonna go up to this big green dragon statue in front of you.
Thank you for releasing me, Spyro. Free 10 dragons in the Artisan world. Then find the balloonist. He'll transport you to the next world.
What about Nasty Gnorc? I'm going after him.
Find dragons first. That's all I can tell you.
We get a little character moment from Spyro here, but more importantly, Nestor tells us exactly what we need to do to progress. Free 10 dragons and find the balloonist. Easy enough. Too easy, in fact. You'll need to collect more than just these green boys if you want to progress further than Peacekeepers. Gems and Egg Thief eggs are also on the docket. Here's a full list if you're curious. You'll notice that the checks for some of the collectibles are pretty infrequent, potentially leading to a blockage in progress. Something that I think Spyro 3 had right, boiling the collectibles down to just eggs and gems and having progress checks at an even rate. I am being a bit hyperbolic. I can't speak for the 4-year-olds that played this back when Clinton was president, but it's pretty easy to meet these requirements to get to the end of the game. This is helped by the fact that there is no required backtracking. All of these can be one and done if you're willing to go the distance. That's how I did 95% of these. I did not leave a level until it was a barren wasteland, which is surprising because that really goes against my usual open world game habits. If I'm gonna go for collecting everything in a game, I like my first visit to be a nice casual stroll, pick up whatever I see, and then come back, get the crumbs. So yeah, the no backtracking was huge. But also, this game has the best gems. They're just so juicy. I mean, like the tactile feedback of Sparks picking them up and then making the sound, it's fantastic. I also really like the $5 blue gem, which was removed and replaced with a purple gem in 2 and 3. I don't know, it just feels right, and I didn't even grow up with it.
Where's Nasty Gnorc? I'll torch him.
Keep your horns on, Spyro! You have much to learn first.
Alrighty, well let's cover Artisans before I front load this anymore. Artisans has everything a budding young Spyro player needs. Dragons that tell you what buttons to press, the how do I glide hill and cliff with treasure on it, and the enemy Gnorcs that are incapable of hurting you and just run away. I especially like the ones with the gem bags that you gotta chase. Not only is it a fun gag and the animation's really good, but it gets you prepped for the egg thieves and even the final boss. I love how the music track here kind of manifests itself into the level itself. It's springtime, it's very happy. If you look at the Gnorc's running animation, it's very bouncy. I mean, it's great, it's fun. I mean, this is probably a lot of people's first ever time playing a Spyro game, and it's just fun to be in Artisans. On top of that, the hub world has some solid identifiable landmarks so you don't get lost, some vertical level design, and a hidden secret we'll get to later. I think Artisans is a solid A-tier hub world. Now, Insomniac wouldn't start hitting it out of the park with S tiers until Spyro 2, but Spyro's original home makes a great first impression. iteration.
But first let me tell you a story.
No thanks. See ya.
It's probably not too surprising that I also really like Stone Hill, the first of the 4 artisan levels. Now, I say the first of 4 mostly because of its proximity to where the game first spawns you. You can do these levels in any order, except for the first Hub World's boss, Toasty, which we'll get to later. Stone Hill is aesthetically and design-wise pretty similar to Artisans. It does feel more subdued, probably thanks to its music track. It feels like stepping out your door and it's the first block on your adventure. Like, you turn around, you can still see your house, you haven't left the neighborhood, you're not in any real danger, but this is certainly not your property. You can't publicly urinate out here. I love that you can get on the crust of this level. Super atmospheric, I just want to have a picnic up here. It's amazing, and it's even more amazing that the developers intended you to hang out up here. It feels like Insomniac were flexing what they could do with the PlayStation. Before this, it was Crash Bandicoot with narrow hallways and a fixed camera. Stone Hill gives you these big open fields you can swing the camera around. The draw distance was way ahead of its time. There was like hardly any pop-in, and on top of that, you could get on top of that.
Oh, it's you. I wasn't sure if you'd escape those annoying little creatures.
Dark Hollow is one of those levels you can just cuddle up with and get lost in on a snowy night. I mean, not really get lost in, it's pretty small. Everybody's criteria for coziness is going to be subjective, but Dark Hollow does check a lot of the fan favorite cozy criteria boxes. It takes place at night, it has bonfires, and has one of the best and very somber music tracks. And if you stick around in the level long enough, it switches to high caves. Also very fitting. Setting aside the tone and ambiance of Dark Hollow, it also teaches one of the most important gameplay mechanics that will carry on through the whole trilogy. Important, yet simple. Flame the big guys and charge anything that looks like Metal Mario. It adds another layer on top of the collecting, and once you start getting a feel for how Spyro moves, you get into a certain rhythm of making the quick mental distinction between flame and charge enemies, all while keeping the collecting going. Or you don't, and you stop before every enemy and take a few seconds to plan your way of attack. You know, you can slice it however you want. There is absolutely zero pressure, and you have all the time in the world.
Did you see a man dressed in blue running around here? He's a thief, and he's stolen a dragon egg. You've got to track him down and get that egg. Run! Run!
Town Square. Now, this is actually a level I played as a small child because it was one of the 2 levels that was included on the Crash 3 disc. It's a beautiful world taking place at sunset in this little settlement. If Stone Hill is the first steps of your adventure and Dark Hollow is the first night, Town Square is like the first layover. It's like the Prancing Pony in Bree, minus the Nazgul. This world is also the gliding litmus test. No level so far has required a glide to get to the end vortex. You've definitely been encouraged to glide by one of the Clancy Brown dragons, that is if you haven't been skipping them.
Spyro, my friend, how about a hint on gliding?
No!
Which is good and all. I think the game communicates the fact that Spyro can glide very well, but playing this level after Spyro 2, I was severely missing the flutter. Not to mention the fact that Spyro just controls very differently in 1 versus his 2 and 3 iteration, which mostly has to do with his charging. This Spyro has front-wheel drive charging. Whenever you turn, his ass kind of drags, and he gets going real quick, even from a jump. What really screwed me up coming from 2 and 3 is how little height Spyro gets from a jump while charging. You can still clear a lot of these gaps this way, but for maximum glide distance, you want to be at a standstill or walking. Now, in my mind, the charge, jump, glide makes a lot more sense in terms of getting distance. In a track meet, you gain a bunch of momentum and a long jump by running down that strip. I'm not here to disparage anyone's preference or even saying this has to make sense. I'm just laying out my thinking process on the movement of this fictional purple dragon. Also, I love that he can do swag rolls. Town Square is still a really well-designed stage. If anything, it uses its space better than any other Spyro 1 level. It's compact while not feeling claustrophobic. Easily my favorite part of the level is this ledge that's seemingly out of reach, and you have to back up and kind of survey your options on how to get to it. And the dragons here, they incentivize you to get up there because that's where the egg thief is, which this is a great level to have one. You know, it's a town, it's got a market, it makes sense. The one thing that I think is holding back Town Square from being one of the greats is its music track. I think it's just okay. The overall melody isn't terribly strong, and they do sneak the main theme in there, but I think our next level does a much better job with it.
Nasty Norc has put one of his most devious henchmen in charge of the artisan world.
Bring him on. I think I smell a barbecue.
Toasty has one prerequisite for this stone dragon's mouth to open so you can access the portal. You must have left at least one other artisan level via the vortex rather than just the pause menu. Most players aren't going to notice it. I mean, it's kind of a fail-safe, so you don't just go directly to Toasty, but I thought I'd bring it up just in case because I, like many others, love leaving levels through the pause menu.
Be careful, Spyro. This boss has many tricks up his sleeve.
Toasty, our first boss level, and I can't put enough quotations around the word boss, so I won't try. I mean, I've been sitting here thinking about what exactly constitutes a boss, and is it a health bar? Is it a repeated pattern of attacks? At the end of the day, it's completely subjective and doesn't really matter. But what raises people's eyebrows about Spyro 1 is it doesn't care to have the traditional bells and whistles that go along with a boss fight, like a health bar. There's no grand entrance or monologue, you just find them loafing around like every other enemy in the game. Despite all that, I think this approach works for Toasty because this boss is essentially just a bait and switch. This Grim Reaper Scarecrow Witch creature is actually just a sheep on stilts. It's a big joke. It's the game saying, you haven't made it far enough to fight the real bosses. But if we're being real, the dogs here are the most threatening thing in this game. Just before we talk to Marco and have him take us over to Peacekeepers, we have one piece of unfinished business in Artisans. Jump on these 5 stones and you'll unlock the first speedway, Sunny Flight. Now, I won't be talking about each speedway individually, they're all your standard fare, kill everything before the time runs out. Some people don't like them, I do. What makes Sunny Flight stand out is how it's hidden. There is a dragon in Wizard Peak that tells you how to access it, but that level's a ways away.
There's a secret area in the artisan home. It is at the waterfall. Try jumping on the stones there.
I'm actually really curious how many people figured out the stone hopping on their own. I mean, you're not really meant to. It just seems like one of those things that would spread via a playground rumor back in the day. It's such an odd addition because none of the other speedways, let alone levels, are hidden like this. You just know if this game was made today, this puzzle mechanic would be stretched over the entire game. The next hub world would have like a more complicated stone hopping puzzle, or Simon Says or something. I think it's cool that this was not placed anywhere else just to get more mileage out of it. It makes Sunny Flight all the more memorable.
Welcome to Peacekeepers, Spyro. Look how our treasure has been turned against us and stolen. Recover our treasure, Spyro.
While in Artisans you had the Drama Club dragons, every dragon in Peacekeepers goes to the gym 7 days a week and reads the Broble before bed.
You know what they say? If you ain't puking, it ain't working.
I really like how Insomniac took a stab at differentiating dragons between hub worlds. Reignited would even take this a step further, but it really shows the polish that went into the original game. Like, sure, most of them do say the line,
Thank you for releasing me.
but there's a lot that have unique dialogue or animation.
Sparks the Dragonfly has been doing a good job protecting you. Make sure to keep him strong by feeding him lots of
cow protein, shrimp, soy protein, pork protein, bro, that's like bacon.
Keeping with its theme, Peacekeepers is very utilitarian. It does its job. It's a big visual contrast from Artisans and offers some interesting ways to traverse the grape juice. And you can interact with the cannons. It's certainly not a pretty hub world. In fact, I'd say it's pretty ugly. It's a bunch of brown, and it's kind of like your toilet bowled in, so you can't even really see the skybox. And it's very small. Peacekeepers might be the smallest hub world next to Gnorc Gnexus, which makes for very little travel time in between the level portals. Normally, I'd say this is a bad thing. Like, why make a hub world if you're going to spend so little time in it? But I think Peacekeepers is somewhat of a special case. Unlike Artisans, where you can just walk around, explore, take in the sights, Peacekeepers, you got a war going on. It's a small, barren, war-torn battlefield, and you're just running through the trenches to get to the next level. On a gameplay level, it doesn't really work. While as charming as these mooning Gnorcs are, they fall all too swiftly and numerously to a single press of the circle button, like most things do in this game. But on a thematic level, I love it.
Is that you, Spyro? Are you the young dragon I've been hearing so much about? Ever since you're a wee puff of smoke, we've known,
You've known?
I forget.
That is the best dragon in the game. Nothing like making fun of the elderly.
What are you even laughing at? The background?
No!
things that are wrong with her.
What?
Dry Canyon and Cliff Town. Both of these levels got some big glides. Dry Canyon, you start at the bottom of a ravine and spend your time stair-stepping your way up, and Cliff Town might be as self-explanatory as these levels get. They're both a good stair-step in difficulty. A little bigger, gyms a bit harder to find, specifically these behind the starting building in Cliff Town. But at this point, the level design is still really good at directing the player. When it thinks it's asking too much this early on, it uses the dragon dialogue to redirect.
Hey, what's on the other side of that river?
Why don't you glide there and find out?
Does Ice Cavern really fit into the Peacekeepers' pantheon of levels? I mean, we didn't really question the Spanish-themed town square had going on. I suppose they're all wastelands, frozen and hot alike? I mean, by name, we're in a cavern, so I guess we're under, like, Dry Canyon or something? Well, that can't be true, because if you look up here, you can see the night sky. I think this level needs to be renamed. I enjoyed my time here. I think it's a great start to the marathon of ice levels that Insomniac would come to make for future Spyro games. Peacekeepers and its other worlds, there's a lot of hustle and bustle, and relatively, they're just more high energy. Ice Cavern has a certain stillness about it, with a hint of danger. It's dark and cold, you get the feeling that no one ever really goes down here. Who in God's name balanced these gems on top of these light posts? The music has this nice little part where it shivers that you can also hear in Spyro 2's Crystal Glacier.
This guy thinks he's so cool. You don't know what it's been like listening to him over and over. But I'll tell you one thing. He should watch his back.
Dr. Shemp, MD, is a fan favorite, and I think I know why. He never directly talks to Spyro. I mean, none of the bosses do, but if one of them were to, it would be this guy. You only hear about him and his antics from the other dragons. You see his appearance, the way he carries himself, and your imagination does the rest. I really do love Shemp as a character, not as a boss fight. Thank the Matrix, he only makes noise when I burn him. Magic Crafters, oh yeah, that's where we start getting in that good Spyro. I didn't realize it until this playthrough, but this is the title card level. It's your Skelos Badlands or your Fireworks Factory. This is Insomniac's best in show, and I'm right there with him. Visually, this is one of the best Spyro environments, period. We're so high up in the mountains that you look below the cliff and it's just Silent Hill mist. We are far, far and away from our home in Artisans. From a more pragmatic viewpoint, I think the hub is a little busy with the amount of enemies running around. It's not too different from a regular stage, but that's my issue. A hub world should feel like a pit stop, a gas station, a quick trip, a Wawa, a Buc-ee's. I gave Peacekeepers a pass because it fits with its theme. Magic Crafters itself kinda gets homogenized with its children's stages just because they all have the same enemies. All those stages lose a little bit of identity. I can partially excuse the Earthbender wizards. They don't directly harm you and they teach you about the supercharge, more on that later. But why not save these guys, I'm not sure exactly what they are, for the stages? It just feels like we're blowing the load a little early, and I'm sorry for phrasing it that way. Is it a deal breaker? No, I think the level design and aesthetic are too good, and once you murder everything in the hub anyway, it really does become one of the best hub worlds. Having played Spyro 3 pretty recently, Alpine Ridge seems pretty familiar. It feels like there should be some sorcerer cats around. Just to make sure I hadn't stumbled upon a groundbreaking Spyro discovery, I checked the wiki. And yes, other people have made the connection that Alpine Ridge and Charmed Ridge share a lot of similarities. Similar music, cliffside caves, and magical flattening staircases. It's probably why I liked Charmed Ridge so much in Spyro 3, is it inherits a lot of the Spyro 1 design that isn't scared to just throw in a fat glide every now and again. The glides here are fantastic. We're starting to see levels where there's just bottomless pits below, right? Failing a glide results in Spyro's death. Alpine Ridge subtly and naturally adds one more caveat to your gliding challenges, and that is timing. What you're seeing right now on the screen, I blame nobody but myself for failing these. And that's a sign of a good game. Just before we move on, we gotta touch on Alpine Ridge's alternate music. Much like how you can stick around Dark Hollow long enough to hear High Caves, same thing in Alpine Ridge, except it's an alternate version of its own track. there's a good amount of levels that got this alternate track treatment. I was a little surprised to learn that this wasn't so much an Easter egg, but a conscious decision from Insomniac to keep the player from getting bored of listening to the same track. Like, that's even possible. It's funny, coming from Spyro 3, where some versions of that game had missing music, and here in Spyro 1 there's additional tracks. And speak of the devil, the very next world had 2 separate pieces of music composed for it. Which one you hear will depend on if you have an NTSC or PAL copy. I went in with the impression that all the Magic Crafter levels were gonna be really samey, and from a visual standpoint, maybe a bit. High Caves is one you remember though.
I hate those bugs. When I become big and strong, like you, I'll squash them all.
Until then...
Whoa! Yeah, Magic Crafters are the inbred dragons. This is the scary metallic bug level. The game does a good job in nudging you in the fact that the only way to defeat them is with Supercharge or Super Flame. Now, this is probably the first level the player is going to encounter Supercharge, and Insomniac, knowing this, has granted them a safety net. Make a mistake and fall into this pit, the fairies got you. Even if you want the sweet relief of death, they will not grant it. It allows the player to safely experiment with Supercharge. And I really like the fact that the fairies bring you back to the start of the Supercharge ramp, saves time. I am gonna say one negative thing, but it comes with a bit of a caveat. This level is asking way too much for first-time Superchargers. To get some of these bugs, you gotta ramp off, do a U-turn, and then dodge and weave through these stalagmites and stalactites. It's actually not too hard mechanically, it's just figuring it out. I feel like it was Insomniac's intention for people to give up, come back later after they have some more Supercharge experience. Or it could just be me. I mean, I've been babied by Spyro 2 and 3. Those don't have Supercharged puzzles really. All the Supercharged segments in those games I would say are more skill-based. It's more about dodging and weaving than stepping back and mapping a route from A to B. I don't know, I feel like I'm the wrong person to judge this level. I was conditioned to do this thing one way, but it's actually done a completely different way. If I'm gonna rest on my laurels, I still think this is a bit too much to throw at a first-time player. Still a solid level, I just wish we had been warmed up on the Supercharge a bit beforehand. Also, am I the only one who wasted like 20 minutes trying to supercharge through this little window?
Welcome to Wizard Peaks. This is my favorite supercharge spot. Use it to bash those wizards.
Wizard Peak, it's more Supercharge, except this time if you screw it up, you gotta walk all the way back. I didn't have trouble seeing the Supercharge paths in this one, probably because I had just played High Caves, and you just have less options in terms of ways to go. But this was the first big gym stumper level that I ran across. And there's no Sparks pointer to save me. I'm on my own. There is something rewarding about using your own brain and spatial awareness to figure out where you need to check. But I will defend the Sparks pointing, not to disparage Spyro 1 for not having it, I mean that's an unfair criticism, but to say that it was a good addition. Some Spyro 1 purists might scoff at that, and that's fine. I respect it, but oh boy, did I waste a lot of time running through all these levels. The pointing is good because it gives you a general direction. It's not like a pinpoint on your map. It's like in Sonic Adventure 1, you had the Tikal ball that would, go this way and it would go to the Master Emerald piece. And really, I don't think anything in this game is super unfairly hidden, except maybe one thing we'll get to later. Going back to Wizard Peak, I had missed an alternate path at the start directly to the left. It reminded me of the Crash Bandicoot levels that put boxes behind the perspective of the camera at the start of the level. If you move your camera at the start, it's obvious, but if you don't... Oh no! In a level where Supercharge is the main mode of transport, it was just like such a kick in the nuts that, oh, you missed it, it was just an alternate path at the start. Both Wizard Peak and High Caves could benefit from some intertwining level design. Give me some ways to get from path A to path B and vice versa. They don't have to be super obvious, you can hide them. Or maybe they just hit them really well, and I'm the sucker. Our next level / boss is, don't laugh, Blowhard. Not only does it not sound like a boss name, it doesn't even sound like a level name. I would love to know if, like, somewhere deep in Insomniac's, or I guess Sony's now, headquarters, if there exists some, like, backstories that somebody wrote for all these bosses. Like, the names seem a little bit too specific and creative. Maybe not Metalhead, but the other ones. Truth be told, I didn't even realize I was fighting a boss the first time I was blowing Blowhard. So as a boss, not so good. As a level, it's a great palate cleanser from all the Supercharged nonsense you've been doing. Beastmakers is the home of the rough and tough motorcycle driving, tobacco chewing dragons. All of the hub world names are ambiguous to a certain extent, except maybe Artisans. But Beastmakers, I mean, what beasts are we making and how? The manual states that the Beastmaker dragons are responsible for bringing forth all new species of creatures living in the world. So this is like the primordial soup for everything. The genesis of dragons, of nasty Gnorc, of these warthogs. It reminds me of that lake in Botswana that I'm not gonna pretend I know how to pronounce the name of, where it was discovered that potentially all modern human life evolved and crawled out of, and now, hundreds of thousands of years later, it's super toxic for science reasons. There's definitely a lot of parallels you can draw, and I wish the game just went a little deeper into why Beastmakers looks the way it does and get into the day-to-day of the Beastmaker dragons. Although I do kind of like the ambiguousness in a way.
Spyro, it's great to see you, but I've got to go.
It makes them feel that much more experienced than Spyro, which raises the question, why is Spyro doing this alone? I mean, get Nestor out there, you know, have him collect some gems. Now, I love myself a good swamp. I've been to New Orleans, I've seen some good swamps. The Beastmaker's hub world, the swamp there, it's not very attractive. It's brown platforms on a green lake. It's what I would imagine a medieval landfill to look like, but without the garbage. Like, that's what it lacks is detail. There's no skybox. It's just a black box. I think it's obvious at this point that Insomniac did not have the same mentality around making hub worlds in this game as they would for 2 and 3, which is fine. I don't want to judge this for being something that it's not. I think Insomniac could spin it in such a way to say, this is the new depreciated Beastmakers after Nasty's rule. You've kind of got a nature versus technology thing going on with the floor zapping Gnorcs. All the wooden platforms become like more sophisticated castle structures, and the hub world ends with a boss fight with a giant robot. All that to say, I still think at face value, this level is ugly as sin. Look at the reignited version. I think this is the biggest glow up any stage has had from original to remake. It actually looks like a swamp. Obviously there's a ton more detail, but also the colors have all been cooled down, so it doesn't just look like somebody peed in the lake.
Jack, I want you to draw me like one of your French girls.
Sure, but what I'd really like to do is get out of this swamp.
My home this is!
Terrace Village is what Beastmakers should have been. It's interesting to look at while maintaining the technology versus nature theme. While I think the Magic Crafter worlds offered a bigger challenge in terms of exploring for gems, the Beastmaker worlds, more than anything, they just want Spyro dead. You gotta lean up in your gamer chair just a little bit. You need to mind your timing to get across these electric floors, and the wind-up animations on some of these enemy attacks are the shortest we've seen. These are fresh ways to keep the player engaged. A game with a premise this simple, it's easy to go on autopilot sometimes. Now, injecting little bits of challenge like this, it's a delicate process, but we never overstep that boundary in this game, or even toe the line. I mean, these Spyro games they're not like Crash Bandicoot. It's much more important that our marsupial friend here presses the jump button at the right time than for Spyro. Now, speedrunning, I'm sure it's a different story, but us mere mortals, I can afford to be Sparksless for a little bit.
I love this double flame charge. It's kind of scary at first, but let's just watch it in slow-mo. As you're coming down, whoo, a little glide, charge, and then flame charge out of the air. I mean, I just love that. The double hit on the flame charge, and that's just nice and clean movement right there.
Be on the lookout for attack frogs. They are cold-blooded killers.
Attack frogs?
And this used to be such a nice swamp.
Over there, that creek, man, I found a couple of soaps on the arrowhead.
Misty Bog is Beastmakers with the brightness turned up. We still don't have a skybox here. Instead, it kind of dilutes into a light green hue, which at least I interpret as a Silent Hill kind of fog. I kind of like it. If anything, it gives the level more of an identity, and it's better than Beastmaker's Black Void. Plus, we got some nice architecture that translates well into level design, and it's certainly the most swampy feeling level. What Misty Bog really has going for it, though, is the music track, and it might sound a bit familiar if you've played the other Spyro games, or have ever finished this one. Your ears don't deceive you, this is a remix of the credits music, or the credits music is a remix of this. Kind of a chicken or the egg situation.
Spyro, if you jump at the end of a supercharge ramp, you can really go far.
I'm all over it.
You know Treetops is serious business when Spyro just flies straight in, no little backwards twirl or nothing. I can tell you, as a Spyro 1 outsider for a lot of my life, Treetops was the infamous one. I recognized a lot of the artisan levels from playing the demo and seeing stuff online, and coming from Spyro 2 and 3, all the Magic Crafter, Dreamweaver stuff, that all kind of blended in for me. But Treetops was the one that would always bubble to the top in online discourse. And more impressively, it was the one level I could bring up to friends who had played this game, and they would be like, oh yeah, Treetops. I hated that. And I imagine it's really easy to have that impression when you're 8. But before we get into it, I think majority of people who have played this level can agree that it is beautiful, or at least more appealing than anything else we've seen in Peacemakers. It's like a ton of giant tree houses 5,000 feet above the ground, and they're all connected by like Sonic the Hedgehog ramps. It kind of reminds me of that Avatar: The Last Airbender episode with Jet, where he had his freedom fighter group in the trees. And the music, oh baby, it's amazing. It's like climbing, but also wobbling at the same time. Like that's how I would describe it to someone. Now, why do people not like this level? Well, I'm sure everybody has their reasons, but I would imagine the most common criticism boils down to this one dragon and the gems around him. He's on his own tiny little island, and seemingly there's no direct ramp to him. Now, thankfully, Insomniac was gracious enough to have these egg thieves show you the correct route. And I mean, just look at this route. I will tell you right now, there's no way I find this on my own. There's no way. You have to take a 90-degree turn, blast off into nothingness off this ramp, go up this other ramp backwards, merge into this conspicuous-looking ramp, and then pray to God that you have enough height to get to the island. I actually quite like it. It is a little difficult mechanically, like it's gonna take you a few tries, not a ton, but the true snag that myself and many others have ran into is that they ignore the egg thieves. You may lose track or just not care about them and go explore other parts of the level. The problem with that is they only reset when you reset. Insomniac is essentially giving you a bone, but that offer expires within 5 seconds of you walking in the door. Unfortunately, this just leaves a lot of players aimless on where they're supposed to go. And while the supercharging is fun, this is a big level to walk across. Even still, in my humble opinion, I think this is a top tier Spyro level. It takes a mechanic it's been training you on and says, okay, that's the main mode of transport. That's how you're gonna even get to the vortex here. Now, I understand that's probably a cold take. It would have been a hot take in like 2001, but you have to understand this game's still fairly or relatively new to me.
This big robot is all charged up to you. Attacking the power pole should disrupt its power pole.
Metalhead as a boss, I suppose it's a fine boss. It's the most involved boss. You have to do the most things. You have to press the most buttons to kill it. The song that plays here has the most bass. It's all a subtly veiled nature versus machine allegory. Or maybe they chose a robot because robots are easy to animate.
Welcome to the Dreamweavers, young one. While chasing Nasty's minions in this world, you must expect the unexpected and prepare for what is not there.
Dreamweavers is where some of Spyro 1's most creative ideas are packaged. Where Magic Crafters was a more grounded Harry Potter-esque fantasy world with wizards, monsters, and still maybe being on Earth just like in the Andes Mountains or something. Dreamweavers is like your Wizard of Oz with an adrenaline shot of Jacob's Ladder kind of world. Things are starting to get pretty weird. The Beastmaker enemy design was already kind of wacky, but here it's gone off the rails. Like right off the hot air balloon, you're greeted by Beaker from the Muppets. You got these jesters that turn into kitchen timers when you attack them, and within some of the levels you have designs that look like they took some demonic or even satanic inspiration. I absolutely love it, and I'm sad I missed out on it as a kid. The entire hub is a collection of floating islands, and in the middle you have a cannon that fires the Big and Small potion from Alice in Wonderland, which now I'm actually wondering if that's a direct reference or not. And what's cool is you can hijack the cannon and use it just like the Peacekeeper ones. This still doesn't sway me on the enemies in the hub world argument. I mean, if anything, this is one of the worst offenders. The Beaker enemies are real annoying because when they're big, they're invincible. Either way, at this point we've gotten pretty used to it. And the track here, it's so good it almost makes up for it. Dark Passages spook, and starts off with a disgusting guitar riff. This is probably the most offsetting Spyro world in the series, not in a real monsters kind of way, more in a cosmic horror kind of way. Every evil or dark cliche you can think of has just been thrown into this floating cave structure that's hanging out in infinite nothingness. With that said, I think they absolutely nailed this level in Reignited. I'm not sure what happened in the Game Boy games or PS2 games, but if the Spyro universe has a purgatory, this is it. I don't think it would really fit in any other Spyro game. Like, can you imagine Hunter from Spyro 2 just hanging out here like, hey Spyro, let me teach you how to glide? Dreams as a foundation for a level, I think is just such a cool idea. Did anybody ever play Gauntlet Dark Legacy? There was like a whole dream realm. The game was so good.
The enemies here can be quite frightening, but you should watch the fools.
I'd rather the fools.
Now you're thinking.
The gimmick here is that the jesters control whether or not the animals around them turn into the demonic versions of themselves. This is triggered when Spyro attacks a jester, toggling its lantern. Lantern on cute, lantern off scary.
If one only remembers to turn on the light.
Lofty Castle is the quintessential Spyro level. This purple dragon fits so well in this environment. You got your artisans, your magic crafters, your charmed ridges, a ton of other great levels. But Lofty just embodies the Spyro experience. If Spyro was in Smash, this would be a stage. Like, I'm a shameless Spyro 2 diehard, but I have to admit, it's a little weird sometimes to see our boy talking to like anthropomorphic cheetahs and turtles. And no shade towards Spyro 2, that game was obviously trying to do something else. I think Lofty is where Spyro 1 peaked in terms of the design and gameplay foundation. It might not be the most cozy, action-packed, or thought-provoking level, but if you were trying to communicate the soul of Spyro games to someone, this is the level you'd show. Wonderfully thought out level design that asks the player to get creative. The visuals, I mean, they speak for themselves. I have no idea why these Gnorcs are floating from these cheetah balloons, but it's amazing. And the music. Oh my god, the music. Moving on to our last normal Dreamweavers level, Haunted Towers. Now, if you're familiar with the history of Insomniac games, after Spyro that is, then you'll know they have something called the Snow Beast Award. I go into more detail on it in my History of Insomniac Games video, but essentially it was an internal award that came about during the development of Ratchet & Clank 2 Going Commando. It was awarded to the developer that made the worst thing that got into the final version of a game. You can probably see where I'm going with this. If I were to retroactively present this award, it would be to the designer of this level, one part in it specifically. But on the surface, Haunted Towers might seem pretty unassuming. It is a proper introduction to the Super Flame, whereas in High Caves it was kind of a secret. The latter half of the level has a bit of supercharge action throughout this castle. By the time I'm done scrubbing every corner that I can find, I'm still missing one dragon and 100+ gems. Now the answer lies in this little sliver of land you can see behind this tower. Right about there. You can't just glide to it though, you gotta supercharge, and it's a bit of a doozy. I'm willing to forgive this a little bit. It's late in the game, so your supercharge skills should be up to snuff, as should your finding stuff skills. In my opinion, could have been highlighted just a little bit more. The real issue is the destination. Grab the dragon on the way in, and the rest of the gems you covet are in this room. This is a timed section where you need to reach the top of the stairs in under 10 seconds, all whilst avoiding attacks from these suits of armor. Now, the worst part is that the game tells you none of this. The only indicator that you're supposed to be in any rush is that the wizard at the top of the stairs is bringing the suits of armor to life sequentially from bottom to top. And I can't remember my experience, but apparently it's worse in Reignited. I'm guessing probably due to the gimped charge. My initial reaction was to find a Super Flame Fairy. That's what Spyro does. He finds things to solve problems. Nothing else up to this point has had a time limit on it except for speedways, and that's a completely different gameplay style. It's the only thing in the game that feels like it was intentionally placed there to block progress and sell strategy guides.
Any advice before this battle?
Oh, I love that. Even Spyro knows these aren't really bosses. The Dreamweaver's boss is this demonic jack-in-the-box named Jack, or Jacques. The level leading up to him is basically the fires of hell. This should have been the level before Buzz in Spyro 3, not the Oceans of Fun level we got. Jack does have one of the more interesting boss levels. It plays with this timed platform mechanic we were introduced to in the Dreamweaver's hub world, and to add a little spice, the platforms are really narrow, so you have to watch where you utilize your charge. Once you have 6,000 gems and are ready to go to Nasty's world, head to the Dreamweaver's balloonist and he'll take you there. For these gem requirement ones, I always think it's funny because you're not actually paying the balloonist. He's just looking inside your wallet and going, yep, that's enough money.
Hey, didn't I already free you?
You're in Nasty's world now, Spyro. And you are the dragon who must defeat him.
Bring him on! I'm ready!
Hey, it's Delbin. This is the Mr. Krabs dragon we freed back in Artisans. If you don't remember, that's okay, because I don't think Insomniac did. Clancy Brown gives a completely different performance for the Artisan one and the Gnorc Gnexus one.
Keep your horns on, Spyro! You have much to learn first!
Reach the exit in each of Nasty's lands. Then you can challenge the Norc himself.
Maybe he's just chilled out a lot since then, but why is he frozen? The popular internet theory is that Delbin was frozen a second time after traveling to Nasty's world to try to face him head on. I suppose that's a solid enough explanation. At least the game gives me credit for saving him a second time. Only 2 more levels until we can fight Nasty Gnorc, and they go by quick. This last chunk of the game, it's very succinct and I appreciate that. Even the hub world is bite-sized. It's straight to business, no screwing around. The developers are being very transparent that this is it.
Keep up the good work, Spyro. I expect Nasty's really starting to worry about you.
I'd be shaking in my Gnorc boots if I were him.
Unlike the other hub worlds, Gnorc Cove and Twilight Harbor must be completed in that order all the way to the Vortex. It's flipping the script a little bit, but it fits in with the context of the story. The stages in the other hub worlds, we could exit them at any time. We were kind of just exploring them at our own leisure, and technically they're all optional. These 2 levels are more linear than your average Spyro level. They're really kind of akin to Crash Bandicoot. I feel like these would be the result of if you asked Naughty Dog circa 1996 to design a Spyro level. There's a lot of narrow hallways, enemies repeating attack animations, and I mean, look at all the wooden boxes in TNT in Gnorc Cove. They definitely ask you to be more dexterous than explorative, and I'm all for it, not just for the change of pace, but they make each of these levels interesting unto themselves. It's so fun just to charge into these metal Donkey Kong barrels in Gnorc Cove and see where they go. In fact, this property would be shared by the Cowlicks in Spyro 2. Twilight Harbor is a beautiful level. The skybox is immaculate. You have this sunset that looks like it just painted the entire level. It's the beauty before the destruction that is to come. But this level is probably most famous or infamous for the straight up guns the Gnorcs have, which to not many's surprise were censored and reignited. Twilight Harbor I think has my favorite supercharged path in the entire game, even though Insomniac robbed me with this glitch. With Twilight Harbor now complete, the next Stone Dragon opens, revealing Nasty Gnorc's portal. And I gotta say, the first few seconds of his track set the tone so well. There's a real nervous energy to it. It's a great piece to go with the confrontation that's been building the entire game. I've seen a lot of comments in my previous videos stating that Spyro was a lot of people's first game ever. And this is me trying to put myself in your shoes, but it must have been really gratifying to actually see Nasty Gnorc standing up there. It's all done very well stylistically and maybe even metaphorically. In the beginning, Spyro was too short to be affected by the spell, and now he must rise to Nasty and the adult dragon's height by proving his skill one last time. That, or they just wanted to pad out the boss fight by having you chase these guys. Collect 2 keys where you can then stair-step your way to Nasty, where he will then immediately retreat. He just runs away. I mean, dude's built like a tank and he runs on those little spindly legs of his. If you're quick enough, he does put up a bit of a fight on his back patio here. Give him a fire breath and he'll head into his patented lava with slowly receding platforms room. Corner him, give him one last flame breath, and he goes down. I have been harping on all of these bosses quite a lot, but I will will give them one thing: they don't break the gameplay flow. Insomniac could have easily done what every other game does, including the sequels to this one, but Spyro 1 chose to stick to its guns rather than jumping on the boss bandwagon. And I really respect it for that. If you can't allocate the time and resources to make a special alternate gameplay style, then don't. Having said that, there does need to be breaks and variations in gameplay. As far as Spyro 1 is concerned, speedways are the variation, hub worlds should have been the breaks. One of those they corrected in the sequels, the other got way too out of hand. Anyway, let's watch this ending.
Sorry I took so long. I kind of forgot about you.
What about Gnasty Gnorc?
Nasty Norc is toast.
So now there's order again in the Dragon Kingdom?
Well, mostly. I've still got some treasure to pick up.
I love how heartless Spyro is in this scene. He's like, yes, I've killed the enemy dictator, it was so much fun, but we still need to get paid.
What will you do next?
I'd say the sky's the limit.
It is all very childish, as it should be. Spyro the whole game, he's all, I can't wait to beat Nasty Gnorc, and then he does, easily. Would it have been more interesting to have a little bit more dialogue and nuance from the characters? Yes. Is that really the point, though? No. The game doesn't lie to you, nor is it trying to be deep. The priority here was to deliver solid gameplay and visuals, but that doesn't mean the experience that it evokes has to be shallow. Whether it was intentional or not, this game, for a lot of people, gives off that certain soothing sensation, while on top of everything is just a really tight 3D platformer. Before I start getting more into my closing thoughts, we do have one more level.
Nasty's ancient history now. So, what's in there?
I believe this is Nasty's treasure hoard, but the gate will not open until you have found everything in the Dragon Kingdom. Come back when you have reached 100%.
Magnus, the last dragon, dragon number 80, tells you like it is. If you want to open the final stone dragon head, they're not really stone, are they? They're kind of metal. If you want to enter Nasty's loot, you need to collect all 12,000 gems, rescue all 80 dragons, and collect all 12 dragon eggs. Thankfully, the pause menu makes it very easy to keep track of what you need and where. It's often said that UI programmers are the unsung heroes in game development, so it's not much, but I'm trying to move that needle just a little bit the other way. So, what is Nasty's loot? Well, as the name suggests, it's the 8,000 remaining treasure Spyro needs to collect from the Gnorcs. It inherits the mechanical setting of the other Nasty worlds, but with a bit of a twist. It looks like the castles from Artisans, but they've all been industrialized. There's metal, pipes, and acid in the water. All it's missing is a Mako reactor. Personally, I probably think this is the best representation of Nasty's world. I probably would have swapped these visual assets for Twilight Harbors or something. I think they're too strong for a bonus level, but who cares? In this world, you can fly infinitely. Kind of. It's like a worse version of the Superfly in Spyro 2 and 3. While your gliding is no longer restricted by the X-axis, it is by the Y. The thieves running around this level hold keys not only to the doors, but also as a permit to fly higher. While I think this sort of progression is satisfying, I wish it were more digestible and intuitive. Like, how exactly is the key raising the invisible ceiling? It makes for a confusing initial visit, but once you understand the laws of nature here, it can be fun inching your way up to the penthouse that holds Nasty's last fat stash of purples.
Spyro the Dragon, you've defeated Gnasty Gnorc, collected the dragon eggs, saved all the dragons, and recovered every bit of treasure in the Dragon Kingdom. How do you feel?
I feel f***ed up, Bob, and I'm happy for the dragon world, of course. I certainly wouldn't want to spend the rest of my dragon days butting heads with Nasty Gnorc and his weird minions.
What's a minion?
Never mind.
This line has always stuck out to me, like what a strange word to stop on. I know minion has a different connotation nowadays, but this line just feels so misplaced. Not that there hasn't been other lines in the game like this, but this one feels especially odd being that it's in the game's last scene. I know I'm reading too far into this. It's likely just a result of, Insomniac can't afford writers for a medium that no one took seriously at this time.
You know what they say, for every good battle, you need a good adversary. And I felt that Nasty, in spite of his misguided nature, was a worthy opponent. Uh-oh. Here we go again!
And there we have it, the here we go again trope, only in the 120% ending. A little strange they'd put it there and not the other ending, but overall it fits. The game ends on a commonly used trope, we're not supposed to take it all that seriously, even though the bad ending must be canonical to connect to Spyro 2 in any way. Credits roll one last time, you're thrown back into Artisans, and you got nothing to do. I guess it's finally time to go outside. Alrighty, well, we've just finished Spyro 1. We're outside on a nice, crisp February night. Two things that I think really elevate Spyro 1 compared to games that were coming out around that time on the PlayStation and on the N64 and Sega Saturn, I suppose. Theming and polish. The theming of Crash Bandicoot, you had these tikis, masks, idols, these islanders, and then you had this mad scientist, pretty much the island of Dr. Moreau, if you've ever read that H.G. Wells book or seen that terrible movie. Evil scientists doing experiments on animals and they get loose. Very easy to understand, right? Spyro 1, it's medieval, erring on the fantasy side. These really cool 6 unique fantasy realms, each specializing in their own sort of magic or medieval interest, right? Our other idea, polish. Spyro 1 is so polished, man. Go play another PS1 game that is not Metal Gear Solid. Spyro, he flies into each stage, he does that little loop and he goes down. 2 and 3 got rid of that. 2 added the cutscenes, which I will take over the flying ring. 3 didn't have anything. 3 is black screen level. Oh, another thing, how the gem counter in this game, it spins. The text, the typeface, the font in this game it's fantastic. It's like that jewel cut. Every number, every letter is jewel cut. And your gem counter, it spins when you're collecting gems and it doesn't immediately update, right? You have to wait a little bit before it stops spinning and you see the number. So you'll collect, a pile of gems and you'll be like, please be enough, because the levels, they always end on a multiple of 100. So it'll be 300, 400, 500, right? And you're like, please don't stop at 399. So that's just something that I don't know how intentional it was to have that go so slowly, but it created some cool moments during my playthrough, right? So theming, the fact that you can tell immediately what the game is, where it takes place, and you get it. You see a screenshot, you're like, I get what this game is about. That was huge. And polish, my God, it feels great to play today. Like I said, go back and play, Final Fantasy VII. That's not really a fair comparison. Bubsy 3D, that's also not a fair comparison. It's more of a fair comparison. It won't look as good. It won't control as good. I go back and play a Spyro game once every couple years. They always hold up. Nostalgia has nothing to do with it. They're just good games. Yes, I do have memories with these games and they are familiar. That's not necessarily nostalgia. Nostalgia is, I think I've only experienced a small handful of times in my life, true nostalgia, and very few of those have ever been from video games, really. Nostalgia, it washes over you. It's from, walking into an old house. I have thought I've been nostalgic for things and gone back to them and be like, oh, this is no good, whether it be books, movies, video games, and Spyro's good, man. It's not just nostalgia. This game can be cozy, even today. Let's wrap it up. It's getting late. I gotta go in soon. So this has been Shanmania. Thank you so much for watching. It's been an absolute joy to cover the entire PS1 Spyro trilogy. Again, thank you. Please press all the buttons, subscribe. Don't forget to tip your waitstaff, and I will see you in my next video. Thank you.